My college football playoff first round preview and predictions are continuing when we go to DKR Memorial Stadium in Austin, Texas. For both of these teams, a little bit of a mixed bag here. Texas, they made the SEC championship game. They were right there at the end. They just couldn't pull it out as again against the Georgia Bulldogs, the offense could not find their rhythm. And for Clemson, 3 losses. People questioning Dabo Swinney here and there, but at the end of the day, they take advantage of a Miami loss. They get to the ACC championship game, and even though SMU came back to tie it, well, the Clemson Tigers able to survive and claim their righteous place back atop the ACC. Two teams that wear the orange color will meet in Austin. It's the Texas Longhorns and the Clemson Tigers, and we'll tell you about the matchup here in just a little bit. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to College Football Playoff First Round Predictions. This is the third video that I am uploading out of the 4. If you haven't watched my other 2 videos, Indiana, Notre Dame, and SMU Penn State, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the final one and you don't miss any other videos that I upload during college football playoff season. Feel free to interact with the channel any way you can, especially just simply by watching this video. It all helps support what I do here on YouTube. And if you want to support me outside of YouTube, go give me a follow on Twitter, Instagram, or anywhere else. It's at TailgateNate29, where pretty darn soon here, we're going to be posting about a lot more things I do in the sports media world. Thank you so much for all of your support, however you may do so. And without further ado, let's dive on in. Let's preview. Let's predict the Tigers and Longhorns. Again, both of these teams made the conference championship game. The only way for Clemson to get in was to win that ACC championship game, which they ended up doing. And for the Texas Longhorns, well, you fell twice to a team that now stakes claim to the number 2 overall seed in the college football playoff. Other than that, they took care of business. You still got some questions about both of these teams, and we will answer them here in just a little bit. How do we do preview and predictions here on the channel? Well, we are going to go through some keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So we are first going to take a look at this Clemson offense against the Texas defense, and then we will flip it. We'll take a look at the Texas offense against the Tiger defense. At the end of the video, I'll go through some final keys, give you some final thoughts, tell you how I believe this game is going to play out, and at the end of the video, of course, we will tell you who is going to win the game between Texas and Clemson from DKR Memorial in Austin, Texas. All right, I don't think we should waste any more time, do you? I don't think so. Let's just go ahead and start diving on into this matchup, and we will first start by previewing this Clemson offense. Again, they got in because they won the ACC, and well, again, mixed bag for Clemson this year. You take a look at that first game of the season, that Georgia game. Yikes, not good. Not good offensively, not good defensively. They just really couldn't get anything going. But when you talk about Clemson from an offensive standpoint, ever since that Georgia game, from the beginning to about the late midway point of the season, Clemson's offense was rolling. They were clicking. They were scoring an abundance of points, and then came the Louisville game. Clemson was rolling, and then that Louisville game came, and it just seemed like nothing went right. And the offense has not been the same since. They scored 51 against the Citadel, but that's the Citadel. You can throw that game out. It couldn't get going against Virginia Tech. It couldn't get going against Pitt. And it couldn't get going against South Carolina. And then it came back against the SMU Mustangs, and it was able to move the football, and it was able to hit its shots, and it was able to generate big plays. It still only got 326 yards of total offense. So even though it seems like Clemson's offense kind of came back, this is an offense that still has been kind of slow and still has been kind of stagnant throughout the late stages here of this season. Besides that Citadel game, I don't think since that Louisville game they have gotten over 400 yards of total offense. They've been close, but they still haven't gotten there. Now, despite what I just said, Cade Klubnik has been a really good quarterback for Clemson, and I feel like he hasn't been talked about enough because he really has taken that next step in his development this year. 3,303 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 5 picks. The dude has been a workhorse for Clemson this year and has played beautifully. Phil Maffa has been an excellent running back here for this team. 1,106 yards and 8 touchdowns and 214 carries. That's right around 5 yards per carry. And well, Cade Klubnik, he can run the football himself as well. He's got 7 rushing touchdowns and over 450 yards on the ground, averaging right around 4 yards per carry. And this is an offense that can hit its shots as well. It's got 3 wide receivers with at least 500 receiving yards this year. All of that, though, led by Antonio Williams. You do have Bryant Wesco Jr. there as well. A tight end in Jake Briningstool is close to that 500-yard mark, and the other wide receiver over it is TJ Moore. They still do have a lot of really good weapons. They can run the ball, they can pass the ball, and when this Clemson offense is clicking and when they're hitting their shots, it's a really tough offense to game plan for because they're really good on third down. They do a fairly decent job at keeping possession of the clock and controlling that tempo, and they don't turn the football over. Only 9 turnovers for the Tigers this year. The one thing they do a little bit too often is allow pressure back to the quarterback, which we'll talk about later. For Texas, you could argue this has been the best defense in college football this season. The Texas Longhorns are a wrecking ball defensively, and we have seen what happens when this defense takes over, right? It took over against Michigan. They were able to come away from that game with a dominant victory on the road. It took over against Oklahoma, allowing the Sooners to only 3 points. It took over against Arkansas, allowing a big play unit only 10 points in that game. And when it mattered most, when a berth to the SEC championship game was on the line, it locked down the Texas A&M Aggies. And at times, it locked down Georgia in both games. It locked down Georgia and forced a lot of turnovers in both meetings, and was able to give this Texas offense a chance to go out there and win that game. And they have a ton of guys in every single level that can make plays defensively. It is, I believe, number 1 in the nation in fewest yards allowed per game. If not, they're second behind Ohio State, which is where they sit in terms of points per game. Ohio State allows the fewest points per game. Texas allows the second fewest points per game. So this is a Texas defense that forces a ton of turnovers, gets a ton of pressure, is really good on third down, can defend anything you throw at them. And this is a Clemson offense that has been struggling to hit its stride. Seems like a mismatch, right? But again, if Clemson is moving and they can hit the big plays, they're going to be a really, really tough unit to stop, even for this Texas team. But again, we've seen this Texas team and we've seen this defense and what it can do when it takes over and what it can do when its pass rush is at its best and when it is forcing a ton of turnovers. I think it is forced to combine 7 or 8 turnovers in the 2 games it has played against Georgia this year, in what a lot of people would argue have by far and away been its toughest team played. And I would agree with that. I think there are some people out there that would say that's Texas's only test, and I think that is an inaccurate statement. But it by far has been their 2 biggest tests of the year, and they have failed both of them. Well, this Clemson offense brings a lot to throw at you. This is a Texas defense that has a lot of really nice talent, though. Hill in the linebacker position. Anthony Hill has been a dog this year. 7.5 sacks, does have a pick, is the leading tackler on this team. A ton of defensive back talent. Taffy and Makuba and Gillibo and Barron. And then you take a look at guys on that defensive front there as well. You do have a ton of guys that can wreak havoc and create pressure to opposing quarterbacks, especially in that linebacker room, which is where they love to bring blitzes from. Barron Sorrell, I've already mentioned Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, and a ton of other guys. This defensive back 7 is loaded, and it's going to provide a challenge for this Clemson team. This game, though, might have to get sloppy for Clemson to win it. And by that, I mean this Texas offense is going to have to, or I should say this Texas defense is going to have to let up some big plays. It's going to have to let Clemson hit its shots. And I just don't know if Texas is going to do that. Kind of think of it like an Ohio State-Michigan thing. For Michigan to win that game, the game had to get a little bit sloppy. And Ohio State defensively had to make some mistakes. And offensively, they had to make some mistakes. I think Texas, for Clemson to win this game, is going to have to make mistakes offensively, but defensively, it's just going to have to make some errors. It's got to be able to not force turnovers. It's got to not have as good of a pass rush as it has, especially for a Clemson offense that's been struggling down the stretch of the season, even in that ACC championship game where it scored, yes, 34 points, but only generated around 325 yards of total offense. Now, when you look at this side of the football, Well, it's another offense that is just struggling. Texas doesn't score a ton, and I know 33.6 points per game might tell you otherwise, but it doesn't really score a ton. It has had trouble at times this year at being able to find their stride in their run game, and Quinn Ewers has been inconsistent. Now, despite all those inconsistencies, he's still got 2,665 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions on the season. Not really a guy that's going to get outside of the pocket and run, so you can kind of just forget that. But with all of the injuries going on within this running back room, Quintravion Wisner has stepped to the plate. Now, did not have a great day against the Georgia Bulldogs. He had 19 carries for 51 yards. Better than what the Texas run game was the first time they played Georgia, but again, not good enough to help them win that game. Still, Wisner has been a great back for Texas this year. 863 yards, 3 touchdowns, right around 5 yards per carry. He does exactly what you ask him to do. Jaden Blue, another guy that can rush the football, 564 yards on the season. He is at 5 yards per carry and has got 6 rushing touchdowns this season. And again, with all the injuries, you could see some other guys step into the fray for Texas there as well. But it does have some exceptionally talented wide receivers. Matthew Golden has been phenomenal for him this year. The tight end, Gunnar Helm, been really good for him this year. Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, all of these guys have been very good weapons. And Silas Bolden really stepped up and made a name for himself in that SEC championship game. He was a great receiver at Oregon State. Kind of surprising some people that he has not been as involved with the offense as some people thought he was going to be. But Silas Bolden really stepped to the plate, made some good plays in the SEC championship game, and even though Texas lost, that's got to be a good sign for the playoffs here moving forward. Now, Texas, again, inconsistent offensive output has plagued this team. It's plagued Clemson from a defensive standpoint as well. I'm going to give you a dirty little secret. I know I've said this Clemson defense on tape before. You can go back and watch. I am on record. Is still pretty good. It's good at forcing turnovers. It's a good third down defense. It's great at being able to provide pressure. But when it comes to slowing teams and units down, it is not the best. In fact, this rush defense is one of the worst in the ACC. It might be the worst in the ACC, and when you take a look across Power 4 football, it is just not that great, which is why my first key, and I'll talk about it now, it's imperative that Texas finds its run game. It could not run the ball twice against a Georgia team that, compared to Georgia standards, has a subpar rush defense. Compared to Clemson standards, this is a god-awful rushing defense. And not saying they don't have talent on that defensive front. They don't have 33 sacks on the season for nothing. It just doesn't show itself, or hasn't shown itself this year with that rush defense. And Clemson had a very hard time containing Brashard Smith. Texas, they got to be able to get that run game working. And Wisner is going to have himself a bounce-back game. He had been rolling into the SEC championship game and then was held to only 50 yards. I find it hard to believe that that's going to be a very similar story there in that one. And even this Clemson secondary is not that great. So Silas Bolden stepping up, great. Clemson's just got one more wide receiver they have to pay attention to, one more pass catching option to be on the lookout for. I think Texas has got to take advantage of anything they can here. And I think it has to involve Arch Manning in some way. I am very much in agreement with some of the big national media talking heads out there that I can see some paths where Texas wins this whole thing, or actually where Texas gets out and Arch Manning is not involved. I don't really think I see a path where Texas can beat the road that they're on and then go beat Clemson, Arizona State, Ohio State, Oregon, or Tennessee, and then possibly a Georgia, possibly a Penn State, possibly a Notre Dame, and get through all of that without Arch Manning being involved in this offensive game plan. I think he's going to be involved in some way, shape, and form. I don't care if it's throwing the football. I don't care if it's running the football. He is about as X Factor gets for this Texas team. If he comes in, makes an impact, that's going to be felt throughout this Texas team, and it's going to be felt throughout the defense. When you watch Clemson thinking, oh, shoot, we didn't quite game plan for this, or there's just too many things to stop. We can't possibly stop him now, too. How can Clemson take advantage of all that? Well, let me tell you how. Get pressure. Do what Clemson has been able to do this entire season. That's get pressure and force turnovers. The one thing that Clemson has going for it that Texas doesn't is turnovers. Clemson forces a ton of turnovers, and Texas has been turnover prone, especially in the two games that they have played against Georgia this year. Now, my question here is which side finds its consistency? Is Clemson going to consistently be able to come up with stop after stop after stop? Or is this Texas offense going to be able to hit their stride and play one of the best offensive games they've played? And is Arch Manning involved in that? I think there are a lot of questions here to answer, but when you look at this game on paper, it should be a runaway. Texas is the more talented team. They have the better talent. They have, I think, the better style to be able to win this game. Now, football games are not played on paper, in case you weren't aware of that before. Football games aren't played with statistics and numbers. If Clemson is able to hit their offensive stride, I think they're going to be able to make this game really interesting. And Clemson has the defensive talent, especially with how inconsistent this Texas offense is, to be able to come up with some stops, to be able to force those takeaways that have plagued Texas all season long. And it's why I think Clemson can win this game. Texas being an 11.5-point favorite is not because of what both of these teams have shown us. Okay, maybe at points, yes, but it's because Texas has the better blue chip ratio. It is the more talented roster. It is the more talented team. I don't trust Texas to be able to cover that. I think this is going to end up being a much, much, much closer game than what the people in Vegas happen to think there as well. I think Clemson is going to hit some shots. I think they're going to come up with some stops, and I think that they're going to be able to force some turnovers. I just think Texas has too many weapons, and I think Wisner, I don't think he's going to be held to 50 rushing yards again, especially with how bad this Clemson run defense has performed all season long. I think Clemson has got too much to prepare for in that secondary, and Andrew Makuba is playing his former team. I think he's going to come away with a takeaway in this game. I think he's going to force Cade Klubnik into a mistake. He knows Cade Klubnik. He knows his game. And Texas has just got too many defensive weapons for me as well. Even if the offense is inconsistent, I could see Texas winning a defensive battle in their defense, forcing some mistakes, and their defense slowing down this Clemson offense. I just think there are too many ways for Texas to win this game. Now, if Arch Manning is not involved in the game plan somehow, that gives Clemson just another advantage that they can pick apart. Because if they can pressure this Texas team, they can get pressure on this Texas offensive front. It could be a long day for this Longhorn unit. I just simply don't think it is going to happen. Texas is too talented. There are more ways for them to win this game than there is for them to lose it, I believe. And 26-20 is where I landed on that final score. I think this could turn into a little bit of a defensive battle, but I think Texas is going to be able to hit their stride against a Clemson defense that has struggled all year, and Clemson just hasn't shown me enough offensively as of late to be able to expose what Texas is going to bring out defensively, because that might be the best defense in the nation. Texas moves on. They'll play Arizona State in the quarterfinals. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comment section down below. We got one more. It's Ohio State, Tennessee coming out in a little bit. Goodbye.